Good evening, and thank you for slipping into Sleepy Kitchen with me. Tonight, we're staying close to the cheese drawer, where wrappers whisper when you unfold them, and the air carries that soft mix of milk, salt, and thyme. Maybe it's a wedge you save for the end of the day. Maybe a handful of shreds waiting to melt. Maybe a crumbly little piece that turns something simple into something finished. In the kitchen, cheese is comfort you can hold, but it's also a craft shaped by people, places, and patience. From mountain dairies to city delis, from lunchbox slices to carefully aged wheels. Here's a quiet hook to keep in mind. Many aged cheeses are naturally very low in lactose, because much of the milk sugar is used up during fermentation and aging. If this kind of calm food storytelling helps you unwind, you're welcome to subscribe or simply come back whenever you want. Let your shoulders drop. Take one slow breath in and out and settle into the gentle pace of the kitchen, as if you're waiting for the first soft melt. Let's begin. Cheese begins when milk is guided to split into two parts, a solid curd and a liquid whey. The split is triggered by acidity, enzymes, or a combination of both. Those changes encourage milk proteins to gather together instead of staying dispersed through the liquid. Once a curd forms, it can be cut and drained. The size of those curd pieces matters more than most people expect. Smaller pieces create more surface area, so whey escapes faster. Larger pieces hold on to whey longer. It is a simple pattern, like small ice cubes melting faster than big ones. The more whey that runs off, the more the curd is concentrated. As curds lose moisture, they tighten and firm up. Drier curds tend to finish firmer and keep longer, while wetter curds tend to stay softer and spoil sooner. Even before aging enters the picture, that early moisture decision starts steering the texture you will feel later. Whey itself is mostly water, with lactose, minerals, and some proteins dissolved in it. That detail explains why draining matters so much. When whey leaves, the remaining curd becomes a denser package of milk's solids. It also explains why some cheeses feel clean and light, while others feel heavy and rich. A curd that keeps more moisture stays more delicate. A curd that gives up more moisture becomes more compact. Once you begin listening for moisture, many cheese styles start sounding less mysterious and more like variations on a single theme. Most cheeses can be described with four basics: milk, salt, cultures, and a coagulant. Milk provides the building material. Cultures guide acidity by turning milk sugar into lactic acid. The coagulant helps the curd set. Salt shapes flavor and also slows unwanted microbial growth. That coagulant might be traditional animal rennet, a microbial version, a plant-based option, or sometimes direct acid. The tools differ, but the job stays the same. Create a curd that can be cut and drained in a controlled way. Many cheeses add nothing else beyond those foundations, which is why reading a label can feel surprisingly informative once you know what you are looking at. Salt is especially flexible. It can be mixed into curds early. It can be rubbed on later. It can also be delivered through a brine. Each method changes how quickly salt moves into the cheese and how much moisture is pulled out along the way. I like these four basics as a label reading map. Once they are clear, the next big question becomes, what kind of milk is doing the work? Because that choice changes flavor and texture before anything else even happens. The kind of milk matters because each animal produces its own balance of fat and protein, and those ratios steer how a curd behaves. Cow milk often reads mild and familiar, especially in young cheeses. Goat milk often tastes more pronounced and can come across as tangier. Sheep milk is usually richer and can feel rounder on the palate. Buffalo milk commonly supports a very creamy texture, which is part of why it pairs naturally with soft, tender cheeses. Sheep and buffalo milk also tend to start with more solids, so they often yield a fuller, denser cheese from the same volume of milk. Goat milk has a different fat profile, and that difference can make its flavor feel more distinct even when the cheese is young. When a label names the milk, it gives you an early clue about flavor, texture, and melting behavior. That can be especially helpful when two cheeses share a similar name, shape, or package. Cheese keeps many nutrients from milk, just packed into a smaller space. When much of the water is removed, protein, calcium, and fat become more concentrated per bite than they are in milk. The exact numbers vary widely by style, and softer cheeses dilute those nutrients with extra moisture. Still, the basic idea holds. This is why a thin slice can feel satisfying. It is also why cheese can add a meaningful amount of calories and sodium without taking up much room on the plate. Brine cheeses and long-aged cheeses tend to carry especially noticeable salt, because salt and flavor compounds both concentrate as moisture drops. That is one reason tasting before adding extra salt is often the simplest way to keep a dish balanced. Some cheeses also end up lower in lactose than fresh milk. Fermentation uses much of the milk sugar as cultures do their work, and aging can reduce it further in many styles. The result is not identical for every cheese, but it helps explain why some people handle aged cheeses more easily than fresh dairy. Nutritionally and practically, cheese is milk that has been rearranged. Once you notice how moisture, salt, and time concentrate what is already there, you begin to predict how a cheese will behave in a recipe. Cheese color usually starts in the milk. It is not a reliable sign of sharpness or age. Some milks carry more yellow-orange pigments from an animal's feed, so the same style can look deeper in color when animals are eating fresh pasture compared with dried feed. Some breeds can also produce milk that looks naturally more golden. In other cases, producers add annatto, a plant-based coloring, to keep certain cheeses looking consistent across seasons and regions. Annatto is used mainly for appearance, not taste. That is why two cheddars can look different yet taste similar, and why a pale cheese can still be bold. Color works best as a clue to tradition and ingredients, not as a meter of intensity. Although store shelves can look repetitive, the wider cheese world runs into the thousands once regional styles are counted. A lot of that diversity comes from a small set of choices. How much moisture stays in the cheese is one. How much salt is used is another. How long the cheese is allowed to change after it is made is a third. Then come decisions about the surface, like whether a rind is encouraged, washed, waxed, or avoided. Small moves also matter, including pressing, heating, and how finely the curd is cut. Each one can shift the result without changing the basic ingredients. Even names can be misleading in a useful way. Many names reflect a place, a shape, or a method, rather than a completely new recipe. That range can sound overwhelming, but it becomes manageable once you sort cheeses by moisture and by what time is allowed to do. Cheese is also one of the oldest ways people found to keep milk useful beyond its brief fresh window. Archaeological evidence, including residues on ancient pottery associated with straining dairy, suggests that curds and whey were being separated at least 7,000 years ago in early farming communities. The logic is preservation, turning milk into curds, draining them, and salting them makes food that travels better and lasts longer than raw milk. Before refrigeration, that difference mattered most in warm seasons, when animals still produced milk, but the air could spoil it quickly. That long history helps explain why cheese was often about saving surplus milk when animals produced more than a household could drink in time. Many historians suggest cheesemaking may have started by accident when milk was carried in a pouch made from an animal's stomach. The stomach lining contains natural enzymes that can help milk set into curds. A container could quietly become a tool without anyone planning it, especially during travel or warm weather. Even if the very first batch is lost to time, the idea explains why rennet became a classic coagulant. It also explains why modern coagulants, whether animal, microbial, or plant-based, are designed to do the same curd-setting job in a controlled, reliable way from batch to batch. From here, it helps to look more closely at what is happening inside milk as it turns from liquid into a curd you can shape. The changes can sound technical at first, but they follow a few steady rules. And once those rules feel familiar, the rest of the cheese map starts to open up in a calm, predictable way. Milk looks like one smooth ingredient, but it is mostly water, carrying a smaller share of solids, and many references place whole milk at roughly 87% water. The practical meaning is simple. Cheese making is, in large part, a controlled way of removing water while keeping the useful solids together. The same starting milk becomes far more dense once much of that water is guided away. A calm kitchen scale helps. If a cup of milk is a glass of liquid with only a few spoonfuls of building material suspended inside, cheese is what you get when you keep most of those spoonfuls and let much of the water go. Because water gives molecules room to move, higher moisture cheeses tend to soften and melt sooner. Lower moisture cheeses hold their shape longer and they grate into drier flakes. That one decision helps explain why some cheeses stay spoonable and fresh tasting, while others become firm, brittle, and sharp. It also sets up the next question. What exactly is doing the building inside milk? The main structural proteins in milk are called caseins. They travel in tiny clusters, often described as casein micelles, that stay suspended instead of collapsing into visible clumps. In fresh milk, those clusters naturally repel one another. That is part of why milk pours smooth, even while it carries fat, minerals, and protein in every sip. Acid or enzymes change the surface behavior of those clusters. The forces that keep them apart weaken. Once that happens, the clusters begin to link together and they form a loose net. That net traps fat and some water, and it becomes a curd. As the curd forms, the extra liquid can drain away as whey. So curd formation is also the first step in concentrating milk. A useful home analogy is a bowl of fine sand. It pours freely when it is dry. Add a little moisture and a little pressure, and it suddenly holds a shape. The grains are the same, but the structure changes. Once the curd exists as a connected network rather than a liquid, the rest of the process becomes about strengthening, shrinking, and organizing that network. One of the simplest dials in cheesemaking is acidity, and the common way to talk about acidity is pH. pH is a scale that describes how acidic a liquid is, with lower numbers meaning more acid. As milk acidifies, casein moves closer to the point where it is willing to gather and set. Curds form more cleanly instead of staying weak and fragile. The shift can be small but meaningful. Moving pH by only a little changes how firmly proteins hold together. Later, that difference can show up as curds that crumble versus curds that stretch. Some cheeses reach the right acidity through added food acids, which moves pH quickly. Others rely on cultures that create acid gradually, which moves pH more slowly and steadily. Both approaches are simply different ways to steer the same dial. Acidity also shapes taste. More acid often reads as brighter and tangier, and acidity helps guide what kinds of microbes can thrive during making and aging. When you see acidity as both a texture control and a flavor control, the next practical question is what actually sets the curd in place. Rennet is a classic coagulant used to set milk into a curd. Traditional animal rennet comes from the stomach lining of young ruminants. The best-known enzyme in that mixture is chymosin. Chymosin targets a specific milk protein, and that action helps casein clusters link into a stable gel instead of staying dispersed. Only a small amount is needed. So, rennet is more about structure than taste, even though it can indirectly shape flavor by shaping texture. In practical kitchen terms, rennet tends to create curds that are more elastic and sliceable than curds formed by straight acid alone. That is one reason many melting cheeses depend on it. Even if you never see the word chymosin on a label, the same enzyme effect is what allows a curd to be cut, stirred, and pressed without falling apart into grainy bits. Once you understand what rennet is doing, the next layer becomes clear too. Not every cheese uses animal rennet, but many cheeses still aim for the same reliable set. Many cheeses today are made without animal rennet, using microbial or vegetable coagulants designed to do the same curd-setting job. Microbial rennet is produced through fermentation. That makes it consistent from batch to batch, and it is a common choice for vegetarian-friendly cheeses. Vegetable coagulants can come from plants such as thistle. They appear in certain traditional regional cheeses where their character is part of the style. On ingredient lists, coagulants are often listed simply as enzymes. A label may not tell you the source unless it specifically says animal rennet or vegetarian. The practical shopper point is that coagulant choice can influence texture, and in some long-aged cheeses, it can contribute a faint bitterness. Many producers balance that through recipe choices and aging time, so the difference is often subtle. What matters most at home is that animal, microbial, and plant enzymes can all set a workable curd. Once the curd is set, the next major variable is time itself, because the same milk can be guided to set quickly or slowly depending on the cheese being made. Curdling does not run on one universal schedule. Different cheeses aim for different curd structures. Setting can take anywhere from about 30 minutes to several hours. A quicker set often produces a firmer gel that can be cut sooner. A slower set can create a more delicate curd that responds differently when it is cut and stirred. This timing is partly about the strength of the coagulant and partly about how fast acidity is moving. So time is not just waiting. It is a way of choosing what the curd will feel like under a knife. In everyday cooking, it resembles the difference between a sauce that thickens quickly and a sauce that needs a longer, calmer simmer to build body. The ingredients might be similar, but the rate changes the final texture. When time has done its work and a curd is ready, temperature becomes the next lever, because warmth changes how fast that curd firms and dries. Temperature during setting and early cooking strongly influences texture. Warmth changes how proteins knit. It also changes how quickly whey can move out of the curd. Higher temperatures generally encourage curds to firm up and expel whey more readily. That supports harder cheeses that can age longer. Lower temperatures tend to leave curds more tender and moist. As curds warm, they also contract slightly. It is a gentle squeezing effect that pushes liquid out from the inside. The scale can be narrower than people expect. Shifts of only a few degrees can make a noticeable difference early on. That is why recipes talk about specific warm ranges instead of just saying hot or warm. Curds respond to heat with real structural change, not just faster cooking. Heat and stirring help whey leave. Then pressing and salting can continue that movement. And once whey has been pushed out on purpose, it helps to understand whey as its own ingredient rather than as waste. The whey that separates from curds is not just leftover water. It holds lactose, which is milk sugar, along with minerals and a distinct set of proteins often called whey proteins. Whey often tastes slightly sweet because much of the milk sugar leaves with it rather than staying trapped in the curd. Whey also carries flavor. That is why draining matters in a second way. How quickly and completely whey is drained can influence whether a young cheese tastes clean and milky or more tangy and sharp. More whey left behind can mean more dissolved sugars and acids staying in the cheese as it continues to change. Because whey retains nutrients, it has long been used in other foods, from bread and soups to fermented drinks. In modern times, it is also concentrated into powders used for cooking and supplements. Thinking of whey as a valuable byproduct makes the process feel less like separating good from bad and more like splitting milk into two useful streams. At home, this two streams idea also helps with a simple sense of scale. If you start with milk, you are not turning it into one thing. You are dividing it into curds and whey, and then deciding how much moisture and salt the curd will keep. That decision is why two cheeses can begin from similar milk and still end in very different places. A fresh cheese that retains more water stays soft, mild, and heavier by weight. A hard cheese that loses more water becomes smaller, drier, and more concentrated. This is also where the earlier rule of thumb fits. People often cite something like 10 pounds of milk to make 1 pound of cheese for firmer, lower moisture cheeses. Softer cheeses can yield more finished weight because they hold more water. The numbers change, but the direction is steady. The drier the cheese, the more milk it typically takes per pound of cheese. In rough yield terms, a gallon of milk can often land you in the neighborhood of about a pound of finished cheese for many firmer styles, with the rest becoming whey. The exact numbers shift with recipe and moisture. A helpful scale is weight. A gallon of milk weighs a bit over 8 pounds. If the finished cheese keeps about 1 pound in solids and trapped moisture, then something like 7 to 8 pounds can leave as whey. Fresh cheeses that retain more water can yield more finished weight. Long-aged hard cheeses give up more moisture over time and often yield less by weight, even though they may deliver more flavor per ounce. This is one reason a small amount of a dry-aged cheese can feel powerful in cooking. A softer fresh cheese may need a larger spoonful to make the same impact. Yield is not just a factory number. It is another way of describing moisture, concentration, and the kinds of flavors that gather as water leaves. Once you have a sense of these simple ratios, the process starts to feel less mysterious. Milk begins as mostly water. Cheese-making guides that water away in a controlled way. Proteins link into a net. Acidity makes that linking easier and shapes taste. Enzymes like rennet make the set reliable and the curd workable. Time changes the feel of the curd. Temperature changes how quickly it firms and dries. Whey carries sweetness and nutrients and becomes useful on its own. And yield reflects how much moisture was allowed to stay. From here, the next question becomes how makers steer flavor on purpose, starting with the cultures that turn milk sugar into gentle acid over time, and that continue to shape cheese long after the curd first appears. Starter cultures are selected bacteria added to milk to steer cheesemaking in a predictable direction. The amount can be tiny compared with the milk, more like adding a spoonful of yogurt to seed a bigger batch than adding a major ingredient. Their main job is to start the right kind of fermentation early, so the milk shifts toward cheese instead of drifting toward random spoilage. Once you think of cultures as a deliberate starting community, it becomes easier to see why the first big change they create is a change in milk sugar. These bacteria use lactose, the natural sugar in milk, and turn it into lactic acid as they grow. The scale is small but powerful. Even a modest rise in acidity changes how milk behaves, the way a small squeeze of lemon can shift how dairy tastes and thickens. As acidity increases, milk proteins stop staying comfortably separated. They become more willing to link into a stable curd. That supports clean draining. It also creates a safer, more controlled environment for the cheese to develop. Once you hold that basic conversion in mind, the next useful idea follows naturally. Different bacteria make different side products as they work, and those side products are where much of flavor begins. Different strains of culture can push flavor in noticeably different directions, even when the milk and salt are similar. One cheese can read mild and buttery, while another tastes sharper and tangier, not because someone added sharpness, but because the microbes left behind different small flavor compounds. Those compounds can include acids, aromatic molecules, and other byproducts that are tiny in size but loud in effect. In everyday terms, it resembles bread. Two loaves can taste different depending on the yeast and fermentation method, even if the flour and salt match. With cheese, the culture choice can quietly bake in a direction for flavor from the very start. Once you accept that, it becomes easy to understand why many cheeses use more than one culture to reach a specific result. Some cheeses are built with a primary starter culture for the early stages and additional adjunct cultures that matter later. The early culture is often chosen for reliable acid production. It is the steady worker that gets the milk into the right conditions for curd formation, draining, and safety. Later cultures may be chosen for aroma, sweetness, nuttiness, or other nuanced notes that develop as the cheese rests. This stacking approach is like using one tool to shape dough and another to finish the crust. The goal changes over time, even though the ingredient remains the same milk. This is also why two cheeses can share a basic make and still diverge during aging. Later microbes can keep nudging the trajectory long after curds are formed. Once more than one culture is on the table, a practical sorting tool becomes temperature, because different cultures prefer different heat ranges. Not all starter cultures thrive at the same temperatures. Cheesemakers often talk about mesophilic cultures versus thermophilic cultures to describe that preference. Mesophilic cultures like moderate, comfortable warmth Thermophilic cultures keep working well at higher, yogurt-like heat. That difference helps separate styles that are gently warm from styles that are cooked more firmly. As a simple consequence, cheeses in the cheddar and Gouda family are commonly associated with mesophilic starters. Many Alpine styles and very hard-cooked cheeses often lean on thermophilic starters because their makes include higher heat steps. Thinking in terms of cooler-loving and heat-tolerant cultures is a beginner-friendly way to predict whether a recipe is aiming for tender curds or a more cooked, long-aging structure. Once temperature is part of your map, it becomes easier to notice one of the most recognizable culture-driven effects in the cheese case: the formation of holes in certain Swiss-style cheeses. The holes in Swiss-style cheeses, often called eyes, form when specific bacteria produce carbon dioxide gas as they continue to work after the cheese is shaped. In many Swiss-style makes, this gas-forming activity happens during a later, warm-aging step, when the right bacteria become more active. Instead of escaping, the gas collects into pockets inside the firming paste. Over time, those pockets become the round openings you see when the wheel is cut. A useful everyday comparison is breadcrumb. Gas made during fermentation creates bubbles that later become the open structure in a slice. In cheese, the bubbles are trapped inside a dense protein network rather than baked into a light loaf. The size and distribution of eyes depend on how the cheese is made and aged. A tighter paste resists bubble growth. A more elastic paste allows larger pockets to form. Once you have seen bacteria shape the inside of a cheese so visibly, it becomes easier to accept that other helpful microbes can shape a cheese in a different, even more dramatic way, including molds. Blue cheeses develop their veins because a food-safe mold, typically Penicillium roqueforti, is introduced so it can grow inside the cheese rather than only on the surface. The word mold can sound like spoilage, but here it is a controlled, beneficial fungus used on purpose. It is closer to the cultured mold on certain traditional foods than to the random fuzz on forgotten leftovers. To help it grow where it is intended, the cheese is often pierced to create tiny air channels. This mold needs oxygen to form its characteristic blue-green veins, so the piercing is a kind of planned ventilation. The practical consequence is that the look of blue cheese is not an accident and not a sign of decay. It is a sign that the right organism was given the right conditions. That example can feel almost like a magic trick, but the calmer truth is simpler. Cheese is full of microbes working within boundaries, and those boundaries are what make the results safe and repeatable. The cultures used in cheese making are selected because they behave predictably in milk, salt, and the temperatures used for each style. Random household molds can be unpleasant or unsafe, but cheese-making microbes are chosen for food use and for the way they respond to acidity and salt. In simple terms, the process creates guardrails. As acidity increases and salt is added, many harmful microbes struggle to compete. Meanwhile, the intended cultures are adapted to those conditions and can keep doing their work. This is also why the same cheese style can be made repeatedly with similar results, even though the microbes are living. The environment nudges them toward familiar outcomes. The milk, the salt, the moisture level, and the temperature steps all work together to keep the microbial stride on a predictable track. Once the right microbes are established, the next question becomes how long they keep working, because cheese does not stop changing the moment it leaves the mold. Even after the curd is formed and the cheese is shaped, cultures can continue working for weeks, months, or longer, depending on the style. Their activity slows as moisture drops and salt rises, but slow does not mean stopped. Gradual change is a big reason an aged cheese tastes deeper and feels firmer than a young version of the same make. Over time, microbial enzymes and naturally occurring enzymes in milk help break large molecules into smaller ones. Those smaller pieces often read as savory, nutty, or complex, even when no extra ingredients were added. This is one of the quiet truths of aging. You are not adding flavor so much as revealing it, as big, bland building blocks are trimmed into smaller, more flavorful shapes. A simple timescale helps. A fresh cheese can taste mostly like milk and salt within days. A hard-aged cheese can keep evolving for a year or more as moisture and chemistry keep shifting. After you understand that ongoing work, one last practical point for shoppers and cooks becomes clearer. Whether those cultures are still alive when you eat the cheese. Not every cheese contains live cultures in the form you might imagine at the moment you buy it. Even though cultures were involved in making it, fresh cheeses often retain more active microbes because they are eaten quickly and keep more moisture. Very aged, very salty. Cheeses may have fewer living cells simply because the environment becomes harsher over time. Some processed cheeses are heated and stabilized for consistency, which can reduce or eliminate live cultures. That is also part of why they behave so smoothly when melted. If live and active cultures matter to you, it is usually something producers mention deliberately on the label. But for most cooking purposes, the more useful takeaway is broader and calmer. Culture choices help decide flavor, tang, and structure long before you open the package. They shaped how the curd drained. They shaped how the cheese aged. And they shaped which textures show up when heat hits it in a pan or on a slice of bread. With cultures in place as the invisible drivers behind many textures, it becomes easier to sort cheeses by the ones meant to be eaten young versus the ones meant to be held. Young cheeses often keep those culture notes bright and simple. They can taste clean, milky, and lightly tangy, with freshness doing most of the work. Aged cheeses carry the longer story. Their cultures moved more slowly, and time gave enzymes room to keep trimming the structure into deeper flavor. From here, it is a gentle step to move toward the cheeses that are meant to be eaten young, while those early culture notes still feel clear and easy to taste. Fresh cheeses are cheeses meant to be eaten soon after they are made, with little to no aging time built into the plan. The time scale is short compared with aged cheeses, often days to a few weeks. That short window keeps flavors milky, gentle, and straightforward. Because fresh cheeses hold more moisture, they tend to feel soft, spreadable, or tender, rather than crumbly and dry. They also usually taste less developed than cheeses that have had months to change. In practical cooking terms, fresh cheeses are more about creaminess and clean dairy flavor than about sharpness. That moisture level is also the main clue for how they will melt, how they will weep, or how well they will hold their shape. Fresh cheeses spoil faster, largely because moisture is a friendly environment for microbial growth. A simple comparison is bread versus crackers. Bread goes stale and moldy faster because it carries more water. Crackers last longer because they are dry. Soft cheeses follow the bread pattern, so they are more sensitive to time, temperature, and how cleanly they are stored once opened. This is why many fresh cheeses are sold in sealed tubs, in brine, or in whey. It is also why changes in smell, surface, or liquid are worth noticing sooner than they might be with a hard cheese. Shelf life shapes cooking habits too. Fresh cheeses tend to fit daily meals and quick plans, not long pantry planning. That reality leads naturally into the first set of choices that define many fresh cheeses: how curds are cut, washed, and drained right after they form. Cottage cheese begins with curds that are cut into small pieces and cooked gently. After that, the curds are often washed or rinsed to reduce acidity. The practical consequence shows up in both taste and texture. Washing can make the curds taste milder. It can also help them feel more distinct and bouncy rather than sharp and clingy. On an everyday scale, it is the difference between a bright, tangy yogurt note and a calmer dairy note, even though the base milk is similar. Cottage cheese also shows how fresh does not mean careless. Curd size and how much whey is removed decide whether it feels creamy, dry, or somewhere in between. Once you see washing as a way to soften tang, a related idea becomes easier to notice. Not every cheese in the fridge case is made from curds in the same way. Ricotta is often described as a cheese, but in its traditional form, it is made from whey, not from the main curd. The name points to the method. Whey is heated, so the remaining proteins gather into delicate little clouds that can be skimmed and drained. The scale is useful. Most of the milk's casein proteins are captured in the main curd, while whey proteins are a smaller share. Ricotta is a way of collecting what would otherwise be left behind. That is why ricotta can feel light and slightly sweet compared with many other cheeses. It is also why it pairs so easily with both savory and sweet foods. This second harvest idea sets up another fresh cheese that returns to curds again, but treats them in a special way to change how they behave under heat. Mozzarella becomes stretchy through a method often called pasta filata, meaning the curds are heated and then pulled and folded. When conditions are right, proteins align into long strands. That alignment is what allows mozzarella to stretch instead of simply melting into a puddle. A kitchen anchor is warmed taffy. Heat it, pull it, and it turns glossy and elastic. Repeat the folding, and the structure changes again. Mozzarella's stretch is why it is a classic for pizza and baked dishes where you want strands rather than a sauce-like melt. Once you recognize that this texture is created by handling while warm, it becomes easier to understand how fresh mozzarella is stored and why it behaves the way it does in a hot oven. Fresh mozzarella carries a high moisture content, often somewhere around the high 50s to about 60% water, depending on style. That is why it is frequently sold in liquid. The practical consequence is that it dries quickly if left unprotected, and a dry surface changes both texture and melting, making it firmer and less creamy. Keeping it in brine or whey helps maintain the soft bite and helps prevent it from turning rubbery, especially in the first day or two after opening. That moisture also means fresh mozzarella can release water during cooking. This is why very wet mozzarella can make a pizza look puddled unless it is drained, patted dry, or used thoughtfully. With fresh cheeses, moisture management is part of good use. You are not just choosing flavor. You are choosing how much water is coming along for the ride. That same theme of moisture and fat working together shows up in a cheese designed to be spreadable. Cream cheese is known for its smooth, dense texture. It became a distinct packaged product in the United States in the late 19th century, and it is often associated with New York in that era. Its structure depends on retaining a lot of moisture and fat while still being stable enough to spread. That is why it feels creamy and cohesive rather than curdy. In practical terms, cream cheese behaves more like a dairy base for mixing than a sliceable cheese. It blends smoothly into dips, fillings, and frostings without needing to melt first. The taste stays mild, partly because it is not aged. It also stays mild because richness softens acidity, so the overall impression is gentle, even when a faint tang is present. That balance is why cream cheese can carry savory flavors like herbs and garlic, and also carry sweet flavors like vanilla and fruit without clashing. Once you understand it as a stable, rich base, it becomes easier to place another fresh dairy product that many people call a cheese, even though it behaves more like thickened cream. Mascarpone is made by thickening cream, often by heating it and adding an acid such as lemon juice or vinegar to encourage it to set. Because the starting point is cream rather than milk, the fat level is naturally higher. The result reads buttery and mellow instead of tangy. A simple kitchen comparison is yogurt versus whipped cream. Both come from dairy, but fat content shifts the whole impression. Mascarpone sits closer to the cream side of that spectrum. This is why it blends so smoothly into desserts like tiramisu, and why it can enrich sauces without bringing a sharp fermented edge. Seeing mascarpone as gently set cream also helps place the next fresh cheese, because it shows what happens when you set curds firmly and then stop the process early, before aging can change the structure. Paneer is a fresh cheese that is set with acid and then pressed. It is known for holding its shape when heated rather than melting into a sauce. One practical reason is that paneer is acid set and unaged, so it does not develop the same meltable, elastic network that many rennet set cheeses build. The pressed structure stays cohesive instead of flowing. A home anchor is tofu. Tofu is also a pressed protein network that can be browned and simmered while remaining in cubes. Paneer fills a similar role in many dishes. Because it stays solid, it can be simmered in sauces without disappearing. That makes it a texture element as much as a flavor element. Paneer is a quiet reminder that fresh does not always mean melts easily. Fresh describes time, not behavior. Behavior still depends on how the protein network was formed and how much moisture and acid are present. That idea opens the door to another common fresh style, where the milk itself brings a strong signature. Fresh goat cheese, often sold as chèvre, tends to taste tangy and distinct even when it is young. One commonly noted reason is that goat milk contains a different mix of fatty acids than cow milk. Those fats contribute characteristic aromas and flavors that can read as bright or goaty to many people. On an everyday scale, it is like the difference between butter and olive oil. Both are fats, but their flavor signatures are unmistakably different, and goat milk brings its own signature into the cheese. That tanginess also pairs well with honey, herbs, and roasted vegetables because it can cut through sweetness and richness with a small amount. With chèvre, the freshness is still there, but the milk's personality is louder, so the cheese feels vivid even without long aging. Taken together, these examples show what fresh really means in practice. Fresh cheeses keep more water. They usually keep flavors closer to milk, with gentle acidity and less time for deep savory notes to form. They tend to be softer, and they tend to change faster once opened, so storage matters more day to day. Some are made from curds, that are washed for mildness. Some are made from whey as a second harvest. Some are stretched so they melt in strands. Some are thickened cream that behaves like a luxurious base. Some are pressed so they hold their shape in heat. And some, like chèvre, carry a strong flavor signature from the milk itself. With these fresh cheeses in mind, the next practical step is to look at what changes when cheese is given time to ripen. Aging begins where fresh cheese stops. Moisture continues to leave. Salt continues to move. Microbes and enzymes keep working, slowly and steadily. And the same milk that tasted simple in its first days can, with time, become something deeper, firmer, and more complex. Aging, also called ripening or affinage, is the period when cheese is held under controlled conditions, so its flavor and texture can develop. The time scale can be short or very long. Some styles are ready after a few weeks. The hardest, longest-aged wheels can be held for years. The practical consequence is clear. Two cheeses made from similar milk can end up tasting completely different if one is sold young and the other is allowed to mature. Aging is not just waiting. The room and the routine are designed to guide slow change, and that slow change begins with enzymes. During aging, enzymes gradually break down proteins and fats into smaller pieces that taste and smell different from the originals. Protein breakdown can create savory, nutty, and brothy notes. Fat breakdown can add fruity, buttery, or sharper aromas, depending on the style and the microbes involved. A calm, everyday comparison is a stew that tastes deeper the next day. The ingredients did not change, but time allowed flavors to spread and new compounds to become noticeable. In cheese, that same effect can be stretched into months. A longer-aged cheese often tastes more complex and more concentrated, even if the ingredient list is almost the same. Once you see enzymes as the quiet workers of aging, the next visible sign becomes easier to notice. Moisture slowly leaving the cheese. Longer aging usually means less moisture. Cheese continues to lose water to the air over time, even in humid rooms, just at a slower, steadier pace. As moisture drops, the paste becomes firmer and more sliceable. Flavor becomes more intense because the same solids are packed into less water. A kitchen anchor is grape juice versus raisins. Remove enough water, and the sweetness becomes denser and more focused, even though the fruit is the same. Moisture loss also changes melting behavior. Drier, older cheeses often melt less smoothly and can separate if overheated, while younger cheeses flow more easily. Because moisture loss is gradual, cheesemakers manage it by managing the room. Humidity is one of the most important controls. Aging spaces are often kept very humid, so cheese dries slowly rather than cracking. Depending on the cheese, humidity is commonly kept in a high range, often somewhere in the 80 to 95% neighborhood for many styles. The practical point is balance. Air that is too dry can harden the surface before the interior is ready. That can trap moisture inside and lead to uneven texture. Air that is too wet can encourage an overly damp surface and unwanted growth. A simple comparison is bread storage. Very dry air makes bread stale quickly. A sealed, overly moist environment can make bread damp and mold-prone. Cheese aging aims for a careful middle where the surface stays protected while the interior continues to change at a similar pace. High humidity slows moisture loss enough to let internal changes keep up with surface drying, which helps the wheel mature evenly. Along with humidity, temperature is the other major environmental dial because it controls how fast enzymes and microbes can work. Traditional aging temperatures are cool and steady rather than cold. Many classic cellars sit around the low to mid-50s Fahrenheit. The practical consequence is gentle progress. Warm rooms speed reactions and can push a cheese toward instability. Very cold rooms slow the work too much and can leave the cheese underdeveloped for its age. A home analogy is dough fermentation. At room temperature, things move quickly. In a cool place, they move more gently. Cheese making often chooses the gentle path so flavors develop in a controlled way. Consistency matters as much as the number. Repeated swings can encourage sweating, cracking, or uneven rind growth. Stable conditions keep the outcome predictable. With the room set, the next thing that shapes aging is the surface itself, because the outside of a cheese is where the environment meets the paste. A rind is a protective outer layer that forms as cheese ages, either naturally or through deliberate care. Some rinds are dry and simple. Some are fuzzy with mold. Some are sticky and washed. The shared role is to manage moisture and to host specific surface microbes that influence aroma and flavor. In a functional sense, a rind is like the crust on bread. It creates a boundary that changes how moisture moves. It also adds flavor where the outside meets air. In many styles, the rind becomes part of the edible experience. In others, it is removed, waxed over, or treated as a protective wrapper rather than food. Because the rind is alive with activity, makers often do small maintenance tasks so it develops evenly. One of the most common is turning. Many aged cheeses are turned regularly during aging, so moisture and fat stay distributed and the wheel matures evenly. The scale is routine rather than dramatic. It is like rotating a roasting pan, so browning stays even. Except the goal here is balanced drying and consistent rind development. Turning can prevent the cheese from settling, bulging, or drying more on one side. It also helps keep surface conditions similar from top to bottom. In some aging rooms, wheels are turned on a schedule that continues for months. That is part of what affinage means in practice. Small actions repeated steadily over time. Regular handling also keeps the rind from sticking to shelves and encourages a uniform exterior. From there, another common aging practice comes into view. One that is less about flipping and more about what touches the surface. Some cheeses are washed or brushed during aging to steer what grows on the rind and how it smells and tastes. Washing with brine, wine, beer, or other liquids favors certain bacteria and discourages others. It can create orange-toned, aromatic rinds in washed rind styles. The practical consequence is that rind care can make a cheese smell strong, while the interior remains creamy and mild. Surface microbes can create powerful aromas, even in thin layers. Brushing a natural rind can also remove excess mold and keep the surface dry and stable. That helps a cheese age longer without becoming overly musty or bitter. These surface choices are part of why cheeses from the same milk can diverge widely. They also set the stage for a texture detail many people notice most in aged cheeses: the presence of crystals. Crystals in aged cheese are small, crunchy bits that form as certain compounds concentrate and organize during aging. Many crystals are made from amino acids that come from protein breakdown. Others can be mineral crystals, depending on the cheese and its chemistry. They tend to show up more in drier, longer-aged cheeses where moisture loss and enzymatic work have had time to build concentration. The practical consequence is that a little crunch is often a sign of age and focus rather than a flaw. It is common in cheeses like aged cheddar and parmesan-style cheeses. A home anchor is honey crystallizing. The honey is still good, but time and concentration allow orderly crystals to appear. Knowing what those crystals are helps you enjoy them instead of worrying about them. It also points to a bigger truth. Time becomes a key ingredient in the hardest, longest-aged styles. Some cheeses are defined by minimum aging rules that protect a style and set expectations for flavor and texture. Parmigiano Reggiano, for example, is required to age for at least 12 months, and many wheels are aged longer for deeper flavor and firmer texture. The practical point is that aging time is not just preference, it can be part of identity. The same cheese at 12 months and at 24 months behaves differently when grated, melted, or eaten in chunks. Longer aging concentrates savory notes and increases brittleness. That is why older Parmesan-style cheeses shave and crumble so well over pasta and salads, and why a small amount can feel so flavorful. With aging understood as controlled time, enzymes, and environment, the next step is to look closely at the cheeses where low moisture and long aging create the firm, dense styles most people think of as hard. Hard cheeses are defined more by moisture level than by a single recipe, and many sit in a lower moisture range, often under about 40%, so they can age longer without spoiling. The practical consequence is texture. The paste becomes firm and sliceable, and often grateable, because less water means a tighter protein structure and slower microbial growth, especially alongside salt and acidity. A simple home comparison is dried pasta versus a fresh noodle. Both can be made from similar basics, but the drier one stores longer and has a more concentrated bite. This low moisture starting point is why hard cheeses tend to taste intense even in small amounts. It also explains why so many of them are sold in wedges meant to last in the refrigerator. Once moisture is low, time becomes a powerful ingredient, and that time shows up in famous regional styles. Parmesan-style cheeses are strongly associated with northern Italy, and the word Parmesan is commonly linked by name and tradition to the area around Parma. The practical takeaway is not the map detail. It is the pattern behind it. Hard cheeses often grow out of places where long keeping was valuable, because large wheels could be stored, moved, and traded. These cheeses were designed to be stable. That stability comes from cooking curds, pressing, salting, and then letting the wheel dry and mature until it becomes dense. Density is why a small shower of grated Parmesan can change a whole pot of pasta or soup. The flavor is concentrated, and the texture dissolves into savory as it warms. Place and method often travel together in hard cheeses, and that leads into a useful distinction between a broad style name and a protected name with specific rules. Parmigiano Reggiano is a protected cheese with strict production rules tied to specific provinces in Italy. The practical consequence is that the name signals a particular method and minimum aging. It is not just a taste idea. It functions like a guarantee of style. You can often recognize an authentic wheel because the rind is stamped during production, and the cheese is sold with markings that trace back to those regulations. For a home cook, the protection matters because it suggests consistency. It tends to be consistent in how it grates, how salty it feels, and how it tastes when eaten in small shards. Many long-aged regional cheeses have similar protections, and that sets up another quiet truth about hard cheeses. Their physical scale is part of how they work, because many are made as very large wheels. Large hard cheese wheels can be heavy, and making them large helps them age more evenly over long periods. Parmigiano Reggiano wheels are commonly described as weighing in the tens of kilograms, often around 80 to 90 pounds. The practical meaning is surface area. A bigger wheel has less surface compared with its interior volume, so it loses moisture more slowly and can mature for a long time without drying out too fast. And a home analogy is a large roast. A thick roast stays juicier than thin slices because the interior is protected, while the surface takes the heat and air exposure. With cheese, the exterior is still doing important work, but the size helps the interior change at a calmer pace. This physical scale also turns the wheel into a kind of storage format. It can be cut into wedges for sale without changing what it is. Once you notice how size supports aging, it becomes easier to understand why flavor in hard cheeses often deepens in predictable ways, including in a cheese many people think of as simple and familiar. Cheddar becomes sharper with age because enzymes and slow, ongoing breakdown keep turning fats and proteins into smaller, stronger-tasting compounds. The time scale can be months to years, and the difference is usually obvious if you taste a mild cheddar next to an extra sharp one. In practical cooking terms, age also changes melt behavior. Young cheddar tends to melt more smoothly. Older cheddar can separate more easily if overheated because it is drier and its proteins have been changed by time. This is why many cooks blend young and aged cheddar in sauces. The younger cheese helps with melt and smoothness, and the older cheese brings punch and depth. Once cheddar is on the table, a common question follows quickly, because people often assume color equals strength. Orange cheddar is not automatically sharper than pale cheddar, because the orange color often comes from annatto, a natural dye made from achiot seeds. The practical consequence is simple. You cannot judge sharpness by shade, since color is frequently a tradition or a consistency choice rather than a flavor choice. In some regions, makers used color to signal seasonal changes. In others, it helped cheeses look similar year-round even when the milk varied. Annatto became a reliable way to do that. For a shopper, this is freeing. It nudges you to choose by age statements and descriptions rather than by appearance. That same theme of visible cues and hidden causes shows up in another well-known feature in the hard cheese case: holes. Gruyere and Emmental are both Alpine-style cheeses, but they differ in their typical hole patterns. Emmental is known for larger eyes. Gruyere often has smaller openings, or it can appear mostly without holes. The practical point is that hole size reflects how gas forms and is trapped during a specific stage of aging, and that depends on cultures, temperature, and how elastic the paste is at the right moment. A kitchen comparison is breadcrumb, but kept simpler. A structure that can stretch holds bigger pockets. A tighter structure holds smaller ones. With cheese, the wheel's warmth during eye development and the bacteria producing carbon dioxide play key roles. So holes are a clue to process rather than decoration. When you notice holes, you are seeing a footprint of the make and the aging room. That is one quiet way hard cheeses reveal their history at a glance. Another hard cheese signals its identity through a very different cue, not inside the paste, but on the rind. Manchego is made from sheep's milk and is closely associated with Spain's La Mancha region. It is often recognized by a distinctive zigzag or herringbone pattern on the rind. The pattern comes from the molds or traditional mats used during shaping, and it works like an identity marker as much as a texture detail. For a home cook, the sheep's milk base is the more useful clue. Sheep's milk often brings a richer, slightly sweet, nutty character compared with many cow milk cheeses. Manchego also illustrates a practical middle ground. Hard cheeses can be firm, yet not as brittle as Parmesan-style cheeses. That makes them good for slicing as well as grating, and it makes them easy to fit into snack plates, sandwiches, and simple cooking. Once you see how region, milk type, and rind treatment help define a cheese, it becomes easier to place very old, hard cheese traditions inside the everyday idea of durability. Pecorino Romano is a hard sheep's milk cheese with roots that reach back into Roman-era food traditions, and historians often note its role as a durable, ration-like food. The practical meaning is portability. Hard, salty cheeses were valuable because they travel well, keep well, and deliver a lot of flavor and nutrition in a small weight. Pecorino Romano's saltiness also makes it useful in cooking the way salt and seasoning are useful. A little grated into pasta, beans, or greens can stand in for both salt and savoriness. This is why many Italian cooking traditions treat it as a pantry staple rather than a special occasion cheese. Even though it is aged and carefully made, it is a cheese designed for daily use, where a small amount can shift a whole dish. With a basic map of hard, aged cheeses in place, the next step is to move toward cheeses that ripen in a different direction. Some cheeses ripen from the surface inward, where the outside changes first and the center follows. In those styles, the rind is not only a protective edge, it becomes the engine of ripening, and the paste softens as it sits under that living surface. Surface-ripened cheeses are cheeses that mature from the outside toward the center, so the rind does a lot of the early work. The practical consequence is a texture gradient. The edge becomes soft and creamy first, while the center can remain firmer until enough time passes. A simple home comparison is a ripe peach. It often softens near the skin before the middle fully gives, because change begins where air and microbes can reach. This outside-in pattern is why timing matters so much with these cheeses. The same wheel can feel chalky one week and luscious the next. Once you expect a gradient, you can make sense of the most famous surface-ripened category, which is the bloomy rind. Brie and camembert develop a white bloomy rind from a mold commonly called Penicillium candidum that is encouraged on the surface. The practical point is that the mold is not accidental. It is chosen and managed so it grows in a controlled way and forms a consistent coat. That coat regulates moisture. It also produces enzymes that soften the cheese beneath it, which is why the interior changes without being stirred or melted. In everyday terms, the rind is like a protective jacket that is also a slow-working tool. It shapes what is underneath while it shields it. Once you know the rind is intentional, it becomes easier to understand why these cheeses can seem to transform as they sit. Bloomy rind cheeses often begin with a firmer, sometimes chalky center. Over time, they become creamy. As ripening enzymes move inward, the scale is often weeks rather than months for many common brie-style cheeses, which is why the same cheese can taste different depending on its age at purchase. A practical consequence is that storage time at home matters more than people expect. Even in the refrigerator, these cheeses keep evolving, just more slowly. If you cut into a young wheel, you may see a thicker, firm core. If you cut into a ripe wheel, the soft layer reaches closer to the middle, and the overall texture feels more spreadable. This is also why a simple Best By date is only a rough guide. Ripening is a process, not a switch. Once texture is understood as a moving target, it helps to talk about the rind itself as food, not just packaging. The rind on a bloomy rind cheese is edible, and it contributes flavor as well as structure. Many people describe the rind's taste as earthy or mushroom-like. That impression comes from compounds produced by the surface microbes as they work on proteins and fats. The practical consequence is that removing the rind changes the experience. You lose some aroma, and you lose the gentle bitterness that can balance the rich interior. If someone dislikes the rind, trimming it is fine. But knowing it is edible removes uncertainty and makes serving simpler. With that in mind, one of the most useful serving details is about temperature, because temperature changes how that soft layer feels on the tongue. Bloomy rind cheeses usually show their best texture when they are served closer to room temperature rather than straight from the refrigerator. The practical reason is that cold fat is firm. The paste feels tighter and less aromatic when chilled. Gentle warming lets the fat soften and aromas rise. A simple comparison is butter. Cold butter is hard to spread and tastes muted. Softened butter feels richer and more fragrant. For brie-style cheeses, even 15 to 30 minutes on the counter can change spreadability noticeably, depending on the room, the size of the piece, and how ripe the cheese is. This is less about making it warm and more about letting it relax. And once you have that relaxed, soft texture in mind, it becomes natural to move toward another surface-ripened family where the rind is cared for in a very different way. Washed rind cheeses are ripened with regular bathing or wiping in brine, wine, beer, or similar liquids. The practical consequence is that washing discourages some molds and encourages certain bacteria that thrive on a damp, salty surface. The result is a rind that is often orange-tinted and strongly aromatic. This method is a controlled form of rind management, not a trick. And it is one reason washed rind cheeses can smell bold, even when the interior remains soft and mild. In everyday terms, it resembles brining. Brining guides flavor and texture by changing the surface environment. Here, washing guides which microbes live on the rind. Once you see washing as a way of selecting surface life, it becomes easier to name one of the best-known bacteria involved. A common washed rind organism is Brevibacterium linens, a bacterium associated with orange color and strong aroma in certain cheeses. The practical point is that aroma is a surface phenomenon as much as a taste phenomenon. Your nose catches volatile compounds produced right at the rind. This is why washed rind cheeses can announce themselves from a distance while still tasting surprisingly gentle once they are in your mouth. A home anchor is a strong-smelling spice jar. The aroma can be intense when you open it, but the flavor in the dish can be balanced and smooth. Understanding that the strongest smells often live near the rind helps you approach these cheeses with less worry and more curiosity. It also supports a calming myth correction about what smell means. Despite their pungent scent, many washed rind cheeses taste milder than they smell, especially when the interior is high in fat and moisture. The practical reason is that smell and taste are related but not identical. Surface microbes can produce powerful aromas without creating harsh bitterness in the paste. Fat also softens perception. A creamy interior can round out what the nose first suggests. This is why a washed rind cheese can work well with simple bread or fruit. The mild sweetness and clean texture of the pairing helps balance the aroma. Once smell is placed in its proper role, the next useful idea is that richness itself can be engineered into surface-ripened cheeses. Triple cream cheeses are made by adding extra cream to the milk or curd, so the finished cheese becomes exceptionally rich. They are often described as having very high fat in the dry matter. The practical consequence is texture. They tend to feel lush, buttery, and spreadable, and they melt on the tongue more like softened butter than like a firm slice of cheese. A simple kitchen comparison is the difference between whole milk yogurt and heavy cream. Fat level changes mouthfeel even before flavor changes. These cheeses are often treated like a luxury spread because a small portion carries a lot of richness and can overwhelm delicate foods if used too heavily. Richness also affects ripening, since fat can slow how quickly certain flavors feel sharp, leading to a gentler taste even when the cheese is very soft. With triple cream, the outside-in ripening pattern is still there, but the mouthfeel becomes the headline. Surface-ripened cheeses depend heavily on airflow and careful wrapping because the rind is alive and needs oxygen to stay healthy. The practical consequence is that completely airtight plastic can trap too much moisture and dull the aroma, while breathable wrap helps the rind stay stable and keeps the surface from becoming overly damp. A home anchor is keeping herbs fresh. Sealed tight, they can turn wet and limp. With a little airflow, they stay in better shape. For surface-ripened cheeses, storage can be as important as the purchase, because the surface is the engine of ripening. If you protect that surface while still letting it breathe, the cheese tends to stay on its best path. With outside-in ripening clear, it becomes easier to understand a cheese family, where mold is not only on the surface, but intentionally grown inside. In those cheeses, air channels are created so the mold can thread through the paste, forming veins and bringing a different kind of intensity. The rind still matters, but the most visible story moves from the edge toward the center in blue-green lines, and that is where the next part of the map begins. Blue cheeses are defined by the controlled growth of a mold inside the cheese, which creates the blue or blue-green veins. The practical consequence is that the look is a map of air and time. The mold grows where oxygen can reach, and where the paste has the right balance of moisture and salt. A simple comparison is the way yeast bubbles show up as holes in bread, except here the pattern is colored because a specific organism is growing in the channels. Blue cheese is therefore not a sign of food going bad. It is a style built around a food-safe mold that is introduced on purpose. Once you frame blue as intentional, the next useful detail is how that mold gets into the cheese in the first place. A common blue cheese mold is Penicillium roqueforti, and it is typically added as spores during making, so it becomes part of the cheese rather than an accident on the outside. The practical point is predictability. The mold is chosen for food production, so it behaves reliably in the conditions of salt, acidity, and aging used for blue styles. Many blue cheeses start with spores mixed into the curd. Some methods introduce the organism through the milk or treat the surface so it is present before the wheel is fully formed. Either way, the mold is not expected to dominate immediately. Early on, the curd is still tight, and the interior is low in oxygen. So the spores wait. They are in place, but they are not yet given the air they need. That is why blue cheeses rely on a second step that sounds dramatic, but is actually simple. Blue cheeses are pierced with needles or rods to create tiny air channels that carry oxygen into the interior. The practical consequence is that the mold can wake up and develop along those channels, forming veins instead of staying quiet, because this mold needs oxygen to grow. A home comparison is aerating soil for plants. Once air can reach deeper layers, different kinds of growth become possible. The number of piercings and their spacing influence how evenly the veins appear. That is why some blues look heavily marbled, while others show fewer bold streaks. This piercing step also helps explain why blue cheese can ripen from the inside as well as the surface. Air access changes the interior environment, so the whole wheel becomes a place where slow ripening can happen. The veins, in other words, are not random. They are planned airflow made visible. Roquefort is a famous blue cheese associated with aging in natural caves in southern France. The practical consequence of cave aging is steadiness. Caves tend to hold stable, cool temperatures and steady humidity, which supports consistent ripening and controlled mold growth. Roquefort's identity is also tied to tradition and protection, so the name signals a specific method and place rather than a generic blue flavor. For a home cook, the takeaway is simple. Some blues are strongly defined by where and how they are aged. That is one reason two cheeses labeled blue can taste very different, even if both show veins. Once you understand that place and method shape the result, it becomes easier to recognize that even within one blue tradition, there can be more than one familiar style. Gorgonzola is often described in two main styles. One is a sweeter, creamier version called dolce. The other is a firmer, sharper version often called picante. The practical point is that aging time and moisture level shift intensity. The same tradition can range from gentle and spreadable to crumbly and bold. A kitchen anchor is chili sauce. A mild version and a hot version can share a name and base ingredients, but time, concentration, and fermentation change how strong it feels. Choosing between these styles is less about liking blue or not liking blue, and more about selecting the level of salt, tang, and texture you want. This range is a reminder that blue cheese is not one flavor. It is a family of cheeses built around a method. And some of the most famous names in that family come with rules, which help set expectations. Stilton is a well-known English blue whose production is protected, so it can only be made under specific standards in a limited set of counties. The practical consequence is that the name signals a certain profile rather than being used for any random blue. For many people, Stilton suggests a rich, crumbly paste and a balanced vein pattern. For a home cook, protected names reduce guesswork. They imply a familiar salt level and a familiar intensity, which matters in salads, sauces, and cheese boards. These protections also hint at something broader. Blue cheese traditions often developed around local conditions, including milk supply and the kinds of aging spaces people had available. Method and place shaped what was practical, and over time, those choices became style. Once names and methods are clear, it helps to address a common safety worry directly and calmly. The mold used in blue cheese is considered safe because it is a controlled food-grade strain, unlike molds that grow unpredictably on spoiled food. The practical reason is selection and environment. Cheese-making conditions of salt, acidity, and controlled aging favor the intended organisms and discourage many harmful ones. A simple comparison is cultured yogurt versus sour milk left on the counter. The first is guided by selected cultures. The second is not. This does not mean every mold is safe. It means the specific molds used in blue cheeses are part of a long, regulated food tradition. Once safety is grounded, the next step is to make flavor feel less mysterious, because blue cheese can taste sharp in a way that feels distinct from other cheeses. Blue cheese often carries a tangy, sometimes peppery impression because mold-driven ripening creates strong aromatic compounds as fats and proteins break down. The practical consequence is that blue can taste more intense than its salt level alone would suggest, because aroma amplifies perceived strength. A kitchen anchor is black pepper. A small amount can feel large because aroma reaches your nose before taste settles on your tongue. This is why blue cheese can punch through rich foods like cream or butter. It is also why it pairs well with sweet elements like fruit, jam, or honey, which soften edges and make the aroma feel rounder. If you understand that aroma is doing much of the work, the whole category becomes easier to use. You can steer it with contrast instead of fighting it. People also experience blue cheese differently. Some people seem especially sensitive to certain aroma compounds, and the same cheese can read pleasantly sharp to one person and strangely harsh to another. Biology and experience both play a role in how smells are interpreted, so preference is not always a simple matter of trying harder. A home comparison is cilantro. Some people find it fresh, while others find it soapy, even when the herb is the same. With blue cheese, if the aroma feels too aggressive, choosing a milder style, using a smaller amount, or pairing it with sweetness can help. But it may still never click for some palates, and that is normal. This variation is useful to remember when cooking for others, because blue cheese can feel like a bold surprise in a dish if someone is sensitive to its aroma. Blue cheeses also vary in texture depending on moisture and age, and that changes how they behave in cooking. Creamier blues can melt into sauces with less graininess. Drier, crumbly blues tend to break into small pieces that hold their shape unless they are fully blended. A simple consequence is that salad crumbles and sauce cheeses can be different choices even if both are labeled blue, because the texture goal is different. In practical use, blue cheese often works best when added gently and not boiled hard. Aggressive heat can make any cheese taste harsher, and it can cause fats to separate if the mixture is pushed too far. With the blue cheese method and behavior clear, the next natural step is to look at cheeses designed for a different goal entirely, where stability and smooth melting are engineered on purpose. Processed cheese was developed to make cheese more stable and predictable, especially for shipping and storage. Many food history accounts trace modern processed cheese to Swiss work around 1911, when makers began heating and blending cheese so it could travel with fewer surprises. The goal was not to invent a new flavor from nothing. The goal was to make an existing food behave the same from batch to batch. The practical result is consistency, because a processed slice is designed to taste and melt in a familiar way week to week, even if the natural cheeses used in the blend shift slightly over time. In everyday terms, it is the difference between a fresh loaf that can vary from day to day and a packaged loaf designed to behave the same every time. Once you see that the main target is repeatable behavior, the key tool behind that behavior becomes easier to name. Emulsifying salts are the main reason processed cheese melts smoothly instead of splitting into oil and clumps. Their job is to help fat and water stay mixed when heat is applied, so the cheese does not collapse into a greasy puddle with rubbery bits underneath. A simple comparison is a stable salad dressing versus one that separates, where an emulsifier helps the mixture stay unified instead of drifting into layers. In cheese, these salts change how the proteins behave. They help the protein network hold water more evenly and release fat less abruptly as it warms. The effect is more structural than flavorful. It changes the way the melt feels on your tongue more than it changes the taste itself. This is why processed cheese can feel silky, even when it is made from sharper base cheeses. It is not magic. It is a carefully guided structure. Once you know what emulsifying salts do, it becomes easier to place a very common product that sits between what people call natural cheese and what people call processed. American cheese is often made by blending cheeses, heating the blend, and mixing in emulsifying salts to create a uniform texture. Depending on the label, you may see terms like pasteurized processed cheese, pasteurized processed cheese food, pasteurized processed cheese spread, or similar category names. Those terms can reflect different standards and different proportions, and they can also signal different added ingredients for texture and stability. The practical takeaway for a home cook is performance. American cheese melts evenly, stays smooth, and resists turning oily or grainy, which is why it shows up in grilled cheese and burgers so often. It is reliable in a hot pan. It is designed to be forgiving. A calm kitchen analogy is chocolate. Some chocolate is made to melt with a certain shine and snap. Other chocolate is made to stay smooth and stable in different conditions. Even if the ingredient list looks a little different, both can be useful depending on what you need the melt to do. In the same way, understanding processed cheese helps soften the false idea that processed always means fake. Most of the time, the main change is controlled melting behavior rather than a completely different kind of food. And once you start thinking in terms of melting behavior, processed cheese becomes a doorway into how any cheese melts, processed or not. Cheese melts differently based on moisture, fat, and age, and those three factors explain most of what you see in a pan. Higher moisture usually means a lower melting point and more flow. Lower moisture makes cheese more likely to hold shape, brown, or stiffen before it truly liquefies. Fat influences smoothness and richness because fat softens the protein network and makes the melt feel lubricated rather than tight. Age matters because time changes protein structure and tends to drive moisture down. That is why older cheeses often melt less smoothly than younger versions of the same style. The practical point is that will it melt is not a yes or no question. It is a question of how it will melt and whether it will stay unified or drift into separate parts. Once you have that idea, a simple comparison makes it visible. High moisture cheeses like mozzarella tend to melt at lower temperatures and flow sooner than very aged, very dry cheeses like parmesan-style cheeses. The result is easy to see. Mozzarella can stretch and pool, while parmesan tends to soften, brown, and then become grainy if pushed too far, especially when it is asked to be the only cheese in the melt. A kitchen anchor is butter versus hard candy. One softens quickly and spreads. The other needs more heat and behaves differently once it does. Moisture is a big part of that difference, because water gives proteins room to slide and reorganize instead of locking into a tight, grainy mass. This is why pizza often relies on mozzarella for the main melt and uses aged cheeses more like seasoning, sprinkled for flavor, rather than asked to carry the whole stretchy layer. In the pan, the cheese is always telling you what it is made to do. Once melting differences are clear, the next practical point is what happens when you apply too much heat, which is one of the most common causes of disappointment. When cheese gets too hot, its proteins tighten and squeeze. That squeezing pushes out fat and water, and the melt can look greasy and broken. You see oil on top. You see little clumps underneath. The mixture stops looking like one smooth thing. A simple comparison is scrambled eggs. Gentle heat keeps them tender. Aggressive heat makes them tighten, weep liquid, and turn rubbery, even though the ingredient is the same. Cheese behaves this way because the protein network acts like a net. It can hold moisture only up to a point. Overheating makes the net contract until it expels what it was holding. This is why melted cheese often looks best at the moment it finishes melting, not after it has been bubbling hard for several minutes. In a quiet way, cheese prefers a soft landing. Preventing separation is mostly about managing structure, and that is where stabilizers and sauces come in. Cheese sauces are often stabilized with starch, commonly through flour, cornstarch, or a cooked roux, because starch helps keep water and fat from separating. What you notice is a smoother texture and a wider safe temperature range, so the sauce can be warmed and served without breaking so easily. A home anchor is gravy. Starch thickens it, but it also helps distribute fat so the sauce feels cohesive instead of slick. In a classic mac and cheese approach, a roux-based white sauce gives you a stable base. Then cheese is added with gentler heat so it melts into that structure rather than clumping on contact. The starch does not only make the sauce thicker, it makes the sauce more forgiving. And that forgiveness is often what people are really tasting when they say a cheese sauce feels smooth. Another stabilizer can do a similar job with an even simpler ingredient list, and it is worth understanding by name. Sodium citrate is a common emulsifying salt used to help cheese melt smoothly into sauces without becoming grainy. The practical point is not that it changes flavor. The point is that it helps the mixture stay together. With a small amount, it can support emulsification and keep proteins from forming tight clumps, turning melted cheese into something closer to a unified sauce. A simple comparison is a vinaigrette that stays together long enough to feel like one dressing instead of separating in the bowl. In cooking, sodium citrate can be especially useful for sauces based on aged cheeses, which can be stubborn melters. It helps them behave more like processed cheese in the pan, not because it turns them into a different food, but because it supports the same structural idea. The sauce becomes calmer. It stops fighting itself when it warms. Seen that way, processed cheese is the same concept scaled up into a product designed to melt on cue. Processed cheese melts smoothly because it is essentially a pre-built emulsion with proteins adjusted for consistent flow. The practical result is that it tends to melt into a unified layer rather than splitting, even with higher heat than a natural cheese sauce might tolerate. This is why it performs well in grilled sandwiches and quick sauces. A home anchor is a sauce that was emulsified and stabilized on purpose versus a sauce you whisk together at the last second. One is designed to stay together no matter what. The other needs more careful handling to stay silky. This predictability can be genuinely helpful when cooking for a crowd because it reduces the risk of a sauce turning gritty or oily at serving time. It does not replace the flavor range of natural cheeses. It offers a specific benefit: reliable melt and mouthfeel. With melt behavior and stability and focus, it becomes natural to connect these ideas to everyday technique, because small handling choices often matter more than the name on the package. A simple way to improve melting is to control heat and add cheese gradually. Slow incorporation reduces clumping and separation because small additions have time to melt and disperse before the proteins tighten into a lump. An everyday comparison is adding butter to a sauce. Small pieces disappear cleanly. A large cold chunk can sit, separate, and resist blending before it fully melts. The same principle explains why shredded cheese melts more easily than a thick block. More surface area means faster, gentler melting. It also explains why gentle heat is often more important than stirring harder. You can whisk all you like, but if the cheese is being pushed past its comfort zone, it will still separate. So, the practical rhythm is quiet and steady. Warm the base gently. Add cheese in small handfuls. Let each addition soften before the next one goes in. If you keep the heat calm, the structure stays calm. And once you understand how moisture, fat, age, and stabilizers steer the melt, you can choose cheeses the way you choose tools. Some cheeses are for stretch. Some are for punch. Some are for dependable smoothness. With these basics in place, the next step is to look at specific cooking moves that help cheese behave well in real dishes, from grating choices to timing and temperature, and the small, ordinary decisions that keep a pot of melted cheese from turning into something you have to rescue. Grated cheese melts faster than sliced cheese because the same weight is divided into many small pieces with far more exposed surface. I think of it like crushed ice melting faster than a single cube, since heat can reach more edges at once. The practical consequence is smoother sauces and more even coverage on casseroles because the cheese softens sooner and has less time to overheat and split. Very fine grating is especially helpful for hard cheeses because tiny particles warm quickly and melt into a sauce before they can toughen. Smaller pieces reach their softening point before the outside dries out, so you can use less total heat to get the same result. If a recipe wants a silky sauce, grating is often the simplest way to get there without extra ingredients. And when melting seems stubborn, changing the shape of the cheese is often easier than changing the recipe. Once shape is on your side, the next quiet variable is starting temperature. Cheese that starts closer to room temperature usually melts more evenly than cheese added straight from the refrigerator. Cold fat is firm, and cold proteins are less flexible, so the outside can soften while the center stays tight. That gap encourages clumps and uneven strands. Even a brief rest on the counter narrows the temperature difference and lets the cheese melt at gentler heat instead of demanding a hotter pan. The practical consequence is control. Lower heat gives you time to blend gradually and stop at the moment the mixture turns smooth. There is also a simple loop to avoid. When cold cheese hits warm sauce, it cools the spot around it. Many people respond by turning up the heat. That extra heat can push the whole pot toward breaking. Starting a little warmer helps you skip that loop. And once starting temperature is in a good place, the next common trouble is not timing, but adding the cheese into a liquid that is simply too hot. It can feel logical to add cheese to very hot liquid so it disappears quickly, but very hot liquid often makes cheese clump. The practical reason is contact heat. High heat tightens proteins on the surface before they can spread through the liquid, so they bond to each other first and form ropey bits that resist whisking. A useful everyday anchor is egg yolk in boiling broth. If the heat is too high, it can turn into strands instead of becoming silky. Many dependable methods therefore lower the heat or take the pot off the burner before the cheese goes in. Then they add it gradually so it has time to loosen and disperse. Some recipes temper by mixing a ladle of warm sauce into the cheese first, then returning that mixture to the pot. The details vary, but the goal is steady. Let the proteins relax slowly instead of snapping tight. This gentle approach connects to the broader rule that controls almost every cheese melt. Gentle heat usually beats high heat. Low and steady heat produces the smoothest melted cheese because it lets the protein network soften without squeezing out fat. What you notice is a sauce that stays glossy and unified instead of looking oily on top, especially when the mixture is warmed rather than boiled. I keep one calm cue in mind. Look for steady steam and small bubbles at the edges instead of a rolling churn in the center of the pot. Indirect heat can help too. A bowl set over simmering water reduces hot spots and makes breaking less likely when a recipe is sensitive. If you see oil beginning to bead on the surface, that is often a quiet sign the heat is climbing too high. Easing back can help the mixture settle and come together again. Patience does more than force. After heat, another strong predictor of whether cheese will melt smoothly is age, because time changes moisture and structure. Younger cheeses generally melt more smoothly than older cheeses because they hold more moisture and their proteins have not been reshaped by long aging. On a simple scale, a young cheddar tends to flow and blend, while a very aged cheddar can turn grainy or separate sooner if pushed too hot. Dryness makes the structure tighter, and tight structure resists a silky melt. This is why extra sharp can be a flavor choice and a texture choice at the same time. Aging builds deeper flavor, but it also changes behavior in the pan. In practical terms, aged cheeses often do best when they are melted gently or used in smaller amounts, rather than being asked to become the entire body of a sauce. That is why aged cheeses are often used as a finishing grate or a small accent in a melt. The age brings aroma and depth, not always flow. Once age is on your mind, it becomes natural to combine cheeses, so each one contributes what it does best. Blending cheeses with different melting strengths often produces a better finished texture than relying on a single cheese. A smoother melting base can provide creaminess, while a drier, more flavorful aged cheese contributes depth without being forced to carry the whole melt by itself. The practical consequence is a sauce that tastes complex but still feels cohesive. Each cheese is used for what it naturally does well. This approach can also balance salt and richness, since a small amount of an assertive cheese can lift flavor without making the sauce heavy. A common pattern is a stretch cheese for body, a creamy melter for smoothness, and a small amount of a hard-aged cheese for aroma. The blend uses strengths instead of fighting weaknesses. And once you are thinking in blends, one more classic tool in melted cheese dishes makes sense: a small touch of acid. A modest amount of acid, such as wine or beer in fondue, can support a smoother melt, especially when the heat stays steady and the mixture is handled gently. The practical point is not that alcohol is required. The useful idea is mild acidity. It can help discourage clumping and keep the mixture feeling unified as it warms. A home anchor is a creamy dressing that feels more balanced with a touch of lemon. The acid does not only brighten the flavor, it can also help the mixture feel smoother. In fondue, that brightness can keep the cheese from tasting flat or overly heavy as it warms. Wine and beer also bring their own flavors, but the practical melting benefit is that gentle acidity can make the pot more forgiving. Acid is one side of cheese under heat. Browning is another kind of heat treatment, where the goal is not smoothness, but toastiness. Broiling cheese browns it through toasty browning reactions that create deeper flavors when proteins and natural sugars meet high heat. The practical consequence is that the surface of a dish can taste nutty and more roasted, even if the interior stays mild, because browning creates new aroma compounds that were not present in the unmelted cheese. A simple anchor is the difference between soft bread and toasted bread, where most of the roasted flavor lives on the browned outside. Because a broiler is intense, the surface can go from pale to deeply browned quickly. So browning is about timing, not long cooking. Different cheeses brown at different speeds, and under a broiler, the surface can also release a little oil as it toasts. The goal is golden and fragrant, not scorched. Once you understand what browning adds, it becomes easier to decide how heat affects flavor, even when a dish needs heat. The next quiet decision is timing. When to add the cheese. Cheese added near the end of cooking tends to keep more of its original flavor than cheese cooked for a long time. Many aromatic compounds in cheese are volatile, so extended simmering can drive them off and leave a flatter impression even when the dish remains rich. A useful anchor is fresh herbs. They taste bright when added late, but become background when cooked for many minutes. In practice, a finishing sprinkle on hot food gives aroma at the table, while a long simmer tends to mute those high notes and blend them into the background. I treat timing as a flavor tool. A little cheese at the end can smell like itself. The same cheese simmered too long can become only richness. With these melting habits in mind, handling starts to feel calmer. Great when you want speed and smoothness. Let the cheese lose its chill so it meets the pot gently. Lower the heat before you add it, and add it in small handfuls. If you want depth without grit, blend a younger melter with a small amount of aged punch. If you want a pot to stay cohesive, keep the heat steady and let mild acidity do its quiet support. And if you want toastiness, save that intense heat for the surface and watch it closely. These are small moves, but they change what cheese does under heat. Once timing and heat feel like tools instead of threats, it becomes natural to think about what happens after cooking. Storage and leftover handling shape how cheese behaves the next day. Whether it stays pleasant in a sauce, firms up in a casserole, or dries out on the surface. The same cheese can be creamy when it is fresh and crumbly after a night in the refrigerator, not because it became bad, but because moisture moved and structure tightened. With that in mind, the next step is to look at everyday handling after the meal, including wrapping, refrigeration, and the small choices that keep cheese tasting like itself when you return to it later. Cheese keeps best when it can breathe a little while, still being protected from drying, which is why wax paper or cheese paper is often a better first wrap than tight plastic. The practical reason is moisture balance. Plastic can trap condensation right against the surface, while paper can absorb a little surface moisture and reduce that damp film that can make aromas feel stale or muddled. A useful everyday comparison is a fresh-baked cookie. If it is sealed while it is still warm, it softens and loses its snap because trapped moisture changes the texture. Cheese surfaces respond in a similar way. They prefer a gentle balance, not a sealed wet chamber, and not open air that dries them out. If you need a second layer for odor control, a simple arrangement is often kinder than a complicated one. Put paper closest to the cheese, then use a looser outer barrier that limits odor without being pressed airtight against the cut face. The goal is to protect the cheese while still letting the surface stay comfortable. Once wrapping makes sense, as moisture management, storage time becomes the next simple thing to sort. Hard cheeses generally last longer in the refrigerator than the soft cheeses because lower moisture slows microbial growth and slows surface breakdown. On a practical scale, firm-aged cheeses often keep for weeks, and sometimes longer when they are wrapped well and kept cold, while fresh and soft ripened cheeses are more commonly measured in days to a few weeks once opened. The reason is not mystery. It is water. High moisture gives microbes more opportunity and gives texture more room to turn sticky or overly tangy. This is why buying a hard cheese wedge is closer to buying a workhorse pantry ingredient, while buying a soft cheese is closer to buying fresh berries, where timing matters more than brand. Once you know which cheeses are long keepers, the next useful skill is knowing what to do if you see mold. If mold appears on a hard cheese, it is often safe to remove it by cutting away the mold with a generous margin and keeping the rest. Many food safety guides suggest cutting at least about 1 inch around and below the mold spot because hard cheese is dense and mold does not tend to travel deeply through it. This guidance is for firm, hard cheeses, not for soft or spreadable styles. A simple anchor is trimming a bruised section from a firm apple. The damage stays localized compared with a softer fruit. The key is to cut past what you can see, since mold threads can extend slightly beyond the visible patch. Use a clean knife and avoid dragging the blade through the mold and then across the clean interior. The goal is to remove the problem area cleanly and keep the rest as undisturbed as possible. This trim and keep rule is not universal, and it changes with softer cheeses. Soft cheeses with unwanted mold are usually best replaced entirely because mold can spread more easily through high moisture, porous foods. The practical reason is density. Soft cheese is less compact, so microscopic growth can travel inward well beyond the visible spot, even when the surface looks like the only problem. An everyday comparison is the difference between a firm block of chocolate and a sponge cake. A spot on the surface tends to stay on one, while it can permeate the other. This is why a fuzzy patch on soft cheeses like cream cheese, ricotta, or many fresh cheeses is usually treated as a sign to replace the whole container. The same caution applies to shredded cheese that is damp or clumped, since moisture creates paths for deeper growth. When in doubt, choosing the safer replacement is a calm decision, not an overreaction. Once mold rules feel simple, the next everyday question is whether freezing is a good backup plan. Freezing cheese changes texture because ice crystals disrupt the protein and moisture structure as the cheese freezes and thaws. The practical consequence is that many cheeses become more crumbly, drier, or slightly mealy after thawing. The flavor can remain, but the bite changes. A home anchor is frozen grapes versus fresh grapes. The taste can still be sweet and familiar, but the texture is never quite the same because water expands and breaks delicate structure. Hard cheeses and shredded cheeses usually tolerate freezing better than soft cheeses. But even then, the best expectation is good for cooking, not back to original. If freezing is used, smaller portions tend to thaw more evenly and reduce repeated temperature swings, which helps the texture stay as pleasant as it can. Freezing becomes most useful when you already know the cheese is headed for melting, baking, or stirring into something warm. Treating freezing as a cooking first choice also helps you evaluate another common convenience product, which is pre-shredded cheese. Pre-shredded cheese often contains anti-caking agents such as cellulose powder or starch, so the shreds stay separate in the bag. The practical consequence is performance. Those powders can slightly dull melting and can make sauces a bit grainier compared with shredding from a block, especially when the recipe relies on a very smooth emulsion. A simple comparison is powdered sugar. It often contains a little starch to prevent clumping, and that small addition can change how it dissolves in a glaze. Pre-shredded cheese is still useful and safe. It can be a great shortcut for topping casseroles or quick sandwiches, but for glossy sauces, it is often less cooperative. Knowing this makes it easier to choose convenience versus texture depending on the dish, without turning it into a moral decision. Once handling and melt behavior are clear, nutrition becomes a calmer, more predictable topic. Cheese is nutrient-dense because it concentrates milk solids, so a small portion can carry meaningful protein and calcium along with fat and sodium. As a common reference point, 1 ounce of cheddar is often listed at about 7 grams of protein and around 200 milligrams of calcium, though exact numbers vary by brand and moisture. The practical consequence is that cheese can strengthen a meal with a small addition, but it can also raise calories and salt quickly if portions grow without noticing. A useful everyday scale is that 1 ounce is roughly the size of a pair of dice, which helps keep the small but strong idea grounded. If you want more protein without as much richness, choosing lower fat or higher moisture cheeses can shift the balance. Softer cheeses often bring more water and less concentrated nutrition per bite, while drier cheeses bring more concentration per ounce. That concentration question leads naturally to a concern many people have about lactose. Many people who are lactose intolerant find aged cheeses easier to tolerate because lactose is reduced during cheese making and aging. The practical reason is that lactose is water soluble and much of it leaves with whey, and then remaining lactose is often consumed by cultures over time, especially in longer aged styles. On an everyday scale, it is the difference between sweet milk and a long fermented yogurt. Fermentation reduces the milk sugar that can cause symptoms. This is not a universal guarantee because tolerance varies and fresher cheeses can still contain more lactose. But the pattern is common enough to be useful when choosing. If lactose is a concern, starting with a small portion of a well-aged hard cheese is often a gentler experiment than starting with a soft, fresh cheese. Labels and surfaces matter in another simple way too, because not every outer layer is food. The wax coating on some cheeses, such as certain Goudas and Edamams, is a protective covering and is not meant to be eaten. The practical consequence is straightforward. The wax is packaging, like a wrapper, and it should be removed so you are tasting the cheese and not the barrier that protected it. Wax helps limit moisture loss and reduces surface mold during storage and transport, which is why it is common on cheeses designed to keep well. A simple home anchor is a citrus peel. It protects what is inside, but it is not always meant to be eaten as is. Once the wax is peeled away, the cheese behaves like any other cut cheese and benefits from breathable storage. With handling and storage mapped, the last useful note is how to use these practical rules to reduce waste. A simple way to use cheese well is to match the format to the job so you finish what you buy before quality slips. Hard cheeses are efficient for grating and finishing because small amounts go far, while softer cheeses are efficient for spreading and quick meals because they deliver moisture and richness at once. The practical consequence is that buying one workhorse hard cheese and one fresh cheese often covers most everyday cooking needs without leaving half-used packages aging in the back of the refrigerator. Choosing smaller pieces of soft cheeses can also keep flavor at its peak, since those cheeses change quickly after opening. If you plan a use for the last bit before you even buy it, waste often drops on its own. With those habits in place, it becomes easier to look outward and notice how different places built cheese traditions around what kept best, what traveled well, and what tasted like home. That outward look often starts in France, a place many people associate with a striking range of regional cheeses. The exact count depends on how you count, because cheese variety is partly a culture of naming. Two cheeses can share the same basic steps and still feel different after small changes in milk, moisture, or rind care. In parts of Europe, protected naming rules add another layer, tying a name to a place and a method, so a label can signal process as much as geography. When you are choosing an unfamiliar French cheese, it often helps to ask for one anchor detail first, like the milk type or firmness. Then let the region be the detail that narrows the guess. Once you have that first clue, the rest becomes calmer. If you keep a few steady questions in mind, every region becomes easier to read. What milk is it? How much moisture does it hold? How much time was it given? And what job does it want to do in heat? When those questions stay with you, the world of cheese starts to feel less like a wall of names and more like a map you can move through slowly without needing to memorize anything. That idea of a cheese built for a specific local need shows up clearly in island cheeses designed around keeping and heat. Halloumi, strongly associated with Cyprus and neighboring Eastern Mediterranean traditions, is known for resisting melt and holding its shape when cooked. The practical reason is method. The curd is cooked and handled to create a tighter protein structure, and in many traditions, it is reheated in hot whey before being shaped, then brined for seasoning and keeping. In everyday cooking, that means you can brown the surface in a pan or on a grill while the center stays chewy. It behaves more like a grillable ingredient than a sauce cheese. Many people notice a gentle squeak when it is bitten, and that squeak is a texture clue that the proteins are set firmly rather than loose and flowing. I treat halloumi as a browning cheese. Because it is salty, halloumi often pairs best with foods that bring freshness, like tomato, cucumber, herbs, or citrus. Once you've met a cheese that stays firm under heat, it becomes natural to name another heat-stable cheese, one built for sauces and stews rather than grilling. Paneer is a fresh-pressed cheese used across South Asian cooking, and it is valued because it stays in pieces when warmed rather than dissolving. The practical reason is that paneer is typically set with an acid such as lemon juice or vinegar and then pressed, creating a firm protein network that does not become elastic the way many rennet set cheeses can. That gives it a dependable job in simmered dishes, because cubes can be stirred through a sauce without turning the whole pot into a melted layer. If you sear or fry it first, the outside can brown lightly while the inside stays tender, which adds texture without changing the basic mild flavor. I use paneer when I want firm cubes. Paneer is also a useful reminder that many cuisines use fresh cheeses as a neutral canvas. The cheese brings body and tenderness. Then spices and aromatics do the talking. That same fresh and fast logic appears again in the crumbly cheeses of the Americas. Queso fresco and related fresh cheeses across Mexico and other parts of Latin America are designed to be made and eaten soon, often crumbled or sliced rather than aged for months. The practical consequence is a clean dairy flavor and a texture that softens with warmth, but usually does not turn stretchy. It works well sprinkled over beans, soups, and tacos as a cool, salty contrast. Many versions are lightly salted and gently pressed, which is why they tend to break into moist crumbs instead of forming long strings when heated. If you put it directly in a very hot pan, it can soften and tighten rather than melt into a puddle. So it is often used as a finishing cheese instead of a browning cheese. I like it when I want crumble, not stretch. Fresh cheeses like this also travel through history as adaptable ideas, changing names and details as they move from place to place. And once you start thinking about cheese as something that can travel, the story naturally turns toward trade. In the Netherlands, traditional cheese markets still take place in certain towns, preserving rituals that grew out of centuries of dairy trade. The practical point is that cheese became a natural commodity because wheels could be stored, transported, and priced by weight in a way fresh milk could not. Public weighing, standardized handling, and clearly sized wheels turned cheese into something that could be traded fairly and recognized at a glance, even by people who were not the makers. In many descriptions of these markets, you see the same repeated idea. Cheese is treated like a unit, almost like a coin, because it can be counted and moved without spoiling quickly. Even when modern commerce happens elsewhere now, the market traditions highlight how strongly cheese is linked to place and economy at the same time. Once cheese can move through markets and labels, it becomes easy for production to scale up in other regions too. In the United States, Wisconsin is widely known for leading cheese production, and the practical consequence is availability and specialization at once. A large dairy base supports everyday styles, and it can also support smaller specialty makers, along with grading and distribution that keep products consistent across long distances. Scale shapes what many Americans think of as normal cheese, because familiar blocks, shreds, and snack formats are built around cheeses that store well and melt predictably. It also helps explain why cheese curds show up as an everyday item in some places, since very fresh curds are a natural byproduct of high-volume cheesemaking and can be sold quickly. Large-scale production does not erase tradition, but it changes what is common, affordable, and easy to find. And in other places, cheese shows up most loudly not in a store, but in public tradition. In England, the best-known cheese rolling event involves participants racing after a wheel down a steep hill, a tradition linked with Double Gloucester. The practical point is not that anyone needs to chase cheese to enjoy it. The point is that cheese is a strong enough symbol to anchor festivals and local pride, because a wheel is a recognizable object tied to a region's dairy identity. Historically, wheels also mattered because they were practical for storage and trade, so the same shape that worked in commerce became an easy emblem in celebration. Even if most people never chase a wheel, the fact that the story is widely repeated shows how familiar the wheel form is in the imagination. Cheese becomes part food, part emblem, part folktale. That cultural affection is also why people give cheese its own little vocabulary of enthusiasm. The word turophile is sometimes used to mean the love of cheese, and a cheese lover may be called a turophile. The practical consequence is gentle rather than dramatic. Cheese enjoyment can be treated like a hobby, with a small vocabulary for texture, aroma, and age that helps choices feel less random. You do not need specialist terms to choose well. A few plain categories still do real work: fresh versus aged, soft versus hard, surface ripened versus internally ripened. Once you learn those labels, tasting becomes easier to describe, because you can connect what you sense to something structural, like moisture, salt, and time. Even simple words like nutty, grassy, buttery, or mushroomy become more useful when you tie them to a style you already recognize. Every cheese, whether fresh or long-aged, local or protected by law, begins as milk and ends as a more concentrated food shaped by time and choices. The practical point is that the same decisions repeat across the world. Moisture predicts texture. Aging predicts intensity. Gentle heat control predicts whether a cheese stretches, browns, or turns into a smooth sauce. Different places used different animals, climates, and microbial traditions, but the goal stayed familiar: turning a perishable liquid into something that keeps, travels, and feeds people in a small space. When you hold on to that simple idea, the details you learned earlier start to line up, from brining and pressing to rind care and melting technique. Cheese stops being a wall of names and becomes a map you can navigate with a few reliable questions. I keep those patterns in mind when I cook, and I like how steady they feel. Milk, salt, time, and a few calm choices doing most of the work. And now, you can let the topic settle the way a pot settles when the heat is turned low, with the surface quiet and the kitchen soft around the edges. Good night, and may you sleep warmly, deeply, and easily until morning.